So guys, the all-in-one, or the A1, that's what we're going to call it from now on. Yeah, so everything's sunk in a bit now. The specs earlier when we watched the release videos and everything like that, and everybody else talking about it. I've had a few hours just to sort of think about you know what is going to be really beneficial to me, and I think it may possibly open a few other eyes to other people who may need it or may not need it, depending on what you do. So obviously the A7R4 I've had for a year or so now, and before that I had the A7R3 and the A7R2, which is obviously 42 megapixels, and obviously A7R4 is 60.1. Sorry, 61. Um, but this is now a 50.1, so I presume they've obviously realised that 50.1 megapixels is obviously a much more beneficial size of megapixels to the 60. One, obviously, with the A7R4, we do get a bit of noise every now and again, and a bit of grain, which isn't the end of the world at all, because when we look at the photos in full size, you can hardly see anything that's an issue. Going from the A7R4, for example, where I've got sort of 120 frames per second HD video and 4K 30 or 4K 25, depending on which mode you're in, this is jumping up to 4K 120 maximum and 8K 30. There are also other modes in there that, if it's the same as the A7S3, it gives you 240 frames per second in HD, which is a really nice speed actually, 240 frames per second. Be nice if it does 480, but I don't know yet. There's not much specs about this side of thing. Also, the ISO control, so ISO 100 to 3200. I'm wondering if it's got the similar dual ISO kind of feature that the A7S3's got, where it sort of just suddenly cleans up hugely at sort of ISO 12,000, I think it is. Because that's a game changer. If it does that, that's awesome. That makes me very happy. Also, noise control obviously is very, very handy, but like I say, generally not really a huge problem. But if you do get cleaner images, it's always a bonus. And then we're on to the sort of 30 frames per second mode in stills. So a lot of people know I've got the Sony RX10 Mark IV, which I can do 24 frames per second. That's generally if you fix it. So if you put the focusing into manual, it will do the full 24. It's probably going to do 20, maybe 18 frames per second if it's tracking something, depending on what situation it's in. Where this focusing system's twice as fast as the A9. So in theory, it might be able to do 30 frames per second, but if it can't, it's probably going to easily do 20, 25. And then obviously the mechanical shutter is still limited to 10 frames per second. That's not really an issue whatsoever. No real drama. That's basically it. I mean, at 30 frames per second, that's a 5-second burst in RAW. So it's about 155 compressed RAWs, or lossless compressed RAWs, or 165 JPEGs in that 5 seconds, if you hold your finger down that long, which I very rarely would, unless it's a plane coming in below, maybe like the Spitfire shot I took when I actually shot with the RX10 Mark IV. I think I did 220 shots as it came through. So if you've got the fast card in there, which read off, I think, 800 megabits per second read speed or write speed, that's going to help a lot to clear that buffer. But obviously you can slow down the frame rate speed, so it could be doing 10 frames per second or even 5, I don't know, or 20 or 30 or anywhere in between that. I don't know, sure what it's actually allowed you to adjust. But for me, where I do dance photography, wildlife photography, air shows, obviously into portraiture, which doesn't really come into the burst mode unless you're doing sort of dance shots, the up to 30 frames per second is a really handy feature. And I will show you in the video, you might have already seen it, when a friend of mine, she's jumping over a jump with her horse, and that's actually 24 frames per second merged together, and you just basically pick out the best shot. So to get the right moment in time has suddenly become much easier, much more achievable than it did when you had 5 frames per second or even 10. So it really, really helps. Having the 1/32,000th of a second shutter speed for me is amazing. I use it on the RX10 Mark IV all the time. Very, very handy in bright light. The fact you can be wide open on your lenses and still you know, get a reasonably good exposure without too much drama at all, especially having up to 1/32,000th of a second, is brilliant. Like I said, the CF Express cards, they're a Type A card, so I think they're smaller than the Bs, which Canon are using, I think. But it says 800 megabits per second, so it should clear the buffer quickly. But you can also use SD cards as well, and it will record 4K or 8K video to the SD cards with ease, with no real drama. Plus, it can actually redundant record, so it can record to both cards in the camera for video. Obviously, no distortion from motion blur. So with the electronic shutter, the sensor has got such a fast readout, and you get that benefit on the A9 or the A9 II, but apparently it's even faster. So 1.5 times faster than the A9 II. So it's pretty much eliminated any issues whatsoever. You've got anti-flicker, which the A7R4 has got an anti-flicker mode, but I don't think it's all that amazing. Not really sure. I've never really used it, but this is going to help big time shooting in LED or fluorescent lighting situations, which, believe it or not, I do quite a bit. So this is going to be a game changer. It's going to help me massively. So this is another reason why shooting those sort of situations could be a game changer for certain people. You can also dial in up to 1/8,000th of a second flicker variable difference. So basically, you can actually do it manually. Find that find the rate so that basically the flicker disappears, so you don't end up with banding lines across your photos. That's just down to the refresh rate of the lights. If you're utilizing something like a Rotolight EOS or any of the Rotolight cameras, you don't really get that issue with those. I don't know how they work, but basically, no, I've never seen any flicker showing up on the photos at all, or even video. But it just shows you how fast the readout off the sensor is. But makes you sort of beg the question: do we actually need a mechanical shutter anymore? Because they can actually, when you come to fire flash, you can do a new sync speed of 1/400th of a second, which is great if you're outside, bright sunlight and stuff like that. You can actually still have your fast shutter speeds and be shooting flash outside without even having to go into high speed sync, which obviously brings limitations in sometimes. But the new thing is flash with the electronic shutter, so no mechanical shutter, and they're allowing you to actually fire flash, which is also another crazy thing that no one else has done yet. So that's a really, really cool thing. You've got 759 AF points, so 92% of the sensor. That's no real drama, that's absolutely fine. Covers pretty much everything. But the main benefit here is it's actually calculating 120 times per second where the focus point is, compared to the A9 II, which is doing 60. And I have a feeling something like the A7R4, which is still very fast, is around about 30 or even 25, 30 per second. So that's the difference. You're not going to miss much at all with this thing, especially if you're shooting at 30 frames per second. Connectivity, it's not something I really use much, but it's maybe something I will do now. So obviously you've got a fast Wi-Fi system, USB 3.2, so you've got fast output. But also got full HDMI cable, so that's handy. They don't snap off very easily either. Much more stronger fitment, and a proper wired LAN port as well. 9.44 million .EVF. So I think the A7R4 is a 5.49 or something like that million .EVF, and that jumped from something from the A7R3 to A7R4. Was it just amazing? It just, you're looking through it thinking, wow, this is incredible. This is so clear. I mean, this is going to be like your eye. Surely. I don't know how much better it's going to be, but the fact it's got 240 frames per second compared to I think 100 frames per second on the previous camera. So yeah, much smoother. Not going to see any blackout at all when shooting burst, which is awesome. So really mega clear view through there. And I thought the A7R4 was amazing. I mean, it is amazing, but this is just another step forward into innovations and things like that. 5.5 stops of stabilization. This is where something you would have thought they would have got better, but to be honest, I've never really struggled with the stabilization. But they have added an active mode for video, which pretty much gives you a really nice steady video, you know, when you're walking around and stuff, which is obviously helpful if you don't want to use a gimbal or something. But apparently it's still not as good as, say, Panasonic, that have been doing, you know, something much better for a while. Downside though, it's probably the only one, but still not the end of the world because it really doesn't bother me. Is the old flip out screen is still from the A7R4, for example, but it has got the new menu from the A7S3 and the touchscreen's abilities. So basically, you can obviously go through the menus and stuff with it, which is good. I don't know about looking at photos if you can pinch and zoom and stuff. I'm not really sure. I've never actually used it on an A7S3, so I'm not sure how far that does allow you. But generally, once I've set the camera up and I've gone into the menus and I set my favourites up, I rarely even go back in because I've got my FN button. Everything's in there I need. You've got programmable dials everywhere and buttons and things, so I rarely go in there anyway, so it's never really that much of an issue. Yeah, and like you say, the more you use a menu and the camera, that you get to know it. You know, I've used Sony for years, and you know, I now know the menu systems pretty much with my eyes shut. So once you've got used to it, you know, it's pretty straightforward. Like I say, we've got an 8K, 30 frames per second, 10-bit, 30-minute overheat limit, but apparently it can go for longer in certain conditions like that. I think that's probably the worst case scenario if it's a warm, hot day. Yeah, so like I say, 4K 60, 4K 120 with the AF tracking. I don't know if it, like I say before, I don't know if it's going to allow us lower resolutions in the HD side of things. I don't know what's really there, which is a shame. You know, that's basically everything I'm very pleased about in the camera. So for me, a bit of a game changer in certain areas, and it's going to allow me to get the work done, the jobs done much more efficiently than I can now. But also, you know, I'm going to get a higher hit rate as well, which is great. And certain things, like I say, I do a lot of dance photos and things like that, especially out on location, but also inside studio space as well. So that's going to help big time, especially with the flickering. That's going to be a game changer, especially when I know there's LED lights in the studio. So luckily they've got big windows for daytime, but obviously if we want to shoot in the evening, you know, I know, yeah, fair enough, I can have the rotor lights on, but still sometimes you want more light, or you just want more of an even spread of light. So, you know, there's certain things that come into play. Competition wise, you've got the Canon R5, which obviously they're going to bring out an R1 maybe or something like that. I'm not sure what it's going to be called. So, you know, makes the R5 look like an incredible bargain personally. You know, are Sony going to bring out something that's going to go in between this, the A1 and kind of the R5? I don't know, but they've kind of blown the water away with everything this thing can do, just like that. If this is where they're pushing and this is what they're going to improve on even more, which I have no idea what you'd really want to improve on, you know, other than putting a better screen on the back, is pretty much bang on for what I will ever need. And I think this is probably a camera that, yes, it costs £6,500, but for me, it's probably a camera that's going to look, I'm going to use for 5 years at least, and never need to upgrade it. Benefits of this as well, you're going to be shooting in the electronic shutter most of the time, so there's going to be hardly any mechanical wear on it. The shutter mechanism isn't going to wear, so it's almost, yeah, it's awesome. So, you know, it's definitely a game changer in some respects, and something I'm very excited about. Bit of a big gulp in purchasing it, but I think in the long run it's going to be one of those things that you just, you know, yeah, it's awesome, and it's going to allow some really, really, really cool work to be sort of captured, and some new things as well for the video side of things. I'll be able to do more, which would be great. Like I say, Canon R5, brilliant camera. I've got a friend who's actually got one, so once I get this A1, we're going to be shooting side by side, just out of interest to see kind of how they look. We know the quality is going to be amazing on both cameras. It's not really about that at all. It's more how the fact that, you know, they feel to each other. You know, it's quite nice to actually be able to compare and feel different camera bodies and different camera makes for the way they work. You know, some things just work better because they thought about it differently than someone else, you know. And it's all about how things are, you know, the fact that you know something completely, you know, like I know Sony for like 14, 15 years I've used them, but I've only used probably 1 or 2 Canons. So very alien to me. So it's quite nice to just have a little play, and it will be interesting to see what the colours are like. You know, the sharpness and everything's going to be very similar. The megapixels are very similar. Very interesting. But, you know, it's going to be one of those things that should make quite a good video at some point. Nikon, I don't know where they're going, but they seem to sort of don't really do much today, do they? They've got their their new mirrorless systems, the Z series. They're slowly coming through, but they may suddenly surprise us as well. Who knows? Other than that, you've obviously got the smaller camera systems from Fuji. You obviously got Panasonic. Pentax don't really know what they're doing anymore. But yeah, there's a lot of other people out there obviously loving their kits, which is absolutely fine. There's no diss. I'm never diss on anybody's cameras. At the end of the day, we buy them because we want them or we need them, one of the two, and we like that way that system works. I've used a Fuji before. I can't remember which one it was now, but a friend of mine owns one, uses it, loves it, and it was a really nice camera. And you've got to remember that most cameras will actually perform and give you the image quality of this new camera for less money. But it's more about how it's going to do it. Did you have to take the shots 20 times, 30 times to get that shot? And did I get it the first go? That's the difference. And if obviously money's involved and you're trying to do a job and you've only got and you're charging by the hour, for example, and you can get the job done, boom, like that, you want to win. So that's the difference, I think. Earning money, and it's a tool that's obviously going to have a long life as well. And like I say, the fact that it's got the mechanical shutter doesn't need to be used all the time is a win situation as well. So anyway, guys, any thoughts about this camera? These are my sort of best bits about what I think the camera is going to be very handy for me personally. There's quite a lot of things there, obviously, but there's some things that are really quite interesting. They're going to be awesome to utilize and benefit from. But like I say, everyone's got different thoughts and theories about things, and what they like and what they don't like. So can't wait until I can get the 100 or 400 G Master on it, and obviously the 135 G Master as well for some portraiture. Is going to be amazing. Other than that, I shall see you soon, guys. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Don't forget to click that little notification bell as well. Please share my channel. I just hit 4,000 subscribers, which I'm really pleased about. I never thought I'd ever get there. I'm a really small little fish in the sea compared to a lot of people out there, but I try and keep everything as real as possible. And it is me. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. I shall see you soon.